Well, hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. This is Pastor Lee, and I am here with
Aiden.
Preston.
And Clayton.
And we're talking Tiger King tonight.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And we are excited about this. It's been sweeping the nation. We've given everybody a little bit of time to talk about this tonight. So we're excited. We're here. Guys, we want to know what your questions are. We got some of the questions on the story this week. But it makes it a lot more exciting as you guys engage with us. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. And we are very excited for this. Yeah. How are you guys excited?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I mean, Clayton even went as far as cutting his hair so that he looks like Joe Exotic. So we do have Joe Exotic with us tonight. For those that are listening, he just took off his headset and waved that mullet around. And it was pretty impressive, actually. Very impressive. All right, so I told these guys, I gave them a heads up because there might be some people watching right now or listening who have never seen Tiger King. Now, just a heads up, there very well may be spoiler alerts at certain points because it's hard to talk about Tiger King without kind of talking about some certain points that would definitely be a spoiler. But I asked these guys beforehand, I want you to think of one word or phrase, appropriate word or phrase that you would describe Tiger King for someone who's never seen it before. What word or phrase comes to mind appropriate? Because one of the things, and as I'm giving Clayton a little bit more time to think here, one of the things that I kind of qualified throughout this week was this is not a family show. So anybody who's seen this, I understand that you've probably seen this with your family, but like your little brother or little sister should not be watching this show. Lots of language, lots of content, lots of things like that, that just wait till you're a little older. I wonder how I would have actually taken this show in when I was in high school. And we might even dive into that a little bit too. So, Aiden, let's start us off. What is the one word or phrase that you would use? You guys give us yours too. One word or phrase that you would use to describe Tiger King to someone who's never seen it before, so they know whether or not they need to look at it too. All right, so
I would say full of lies.
Full of lies. Okay, there's your phrase. Got it. Wait,
what would yours be?
I would say greedy.
Greedy. Okay, greedy. That's a good one.
I feel like it's very sus. So like suspicious. Just like one word, suspicious. Yeah.
Suspicious. Okay. I'm loving some of the stuff coming through the chat.
Vulgar.
I'm gonna borrow actually one of our staff members here, Kyle, was talking to me about how he's like, you didn't have me on the show for Tiger King. I'm not mad, just a little disappointed. And I was like, no, that's cool, man. We might be, who knows how long we'll be talking about Tiger King. But I'm gonna steal his phrase. And that phrase was dumpster fire. Kind of can't help but look and even though you're like, oh, like, why am I still watching this? And it kind of brings you in here too. So just so the people that are listening can hear some of the stuff we're seeing come through. Corey said vulgar, and there's certainly a lot of vulgarity in there. Austin, I think that is a total win, and definitely a way that a lot of people would describe it. He said crazy with a lot of emphasis in the way that he typed that out. Shocking. Corey's given us even more. And then Melissa goes binge worthy. And I think so. I mean, it's one of those ones. Well, here's the thing. There was a lot of people were very, what's the word in their response?
Shocked.
And there's a lot of shock, a lot of, I can't handle this. And I started watching it, and I don't know what this tells you about me, but I was kind of like probably 3 or 4 episodes in going, wait, what's the big deal again? And and we'll talk about that, like why that was. But kind of, well, were you guys shocked or not?
I mean, I was shocked the first episode when, he had just, you see all the tigers. The first episode, didn't it show Shaq and everything come on? Apparently, the way it portrayed in all the local news in Oklahoma, it he was the biggest deal to Oklahoma. And growing up, I never heard about him until this show came on. But the way the news covered him, it's like he was a national story or something like that.
Yeah.
Good. No, I think this has taken us somewhere really, really good. And I want you guys to think about that, because I think we can all agree there is a level of shock, even though I didn't have the initial shock and things like that. But here's the ultimate question for this. Why was it so shocking? And I think Preston got us close to it, or even almost all the way there. Why was it so shocking for you? Why was it so shocking for you guys? Clayton, Aiden, what do you got?
I don't think I really was shocked until the very last episode, like the one that they just recently came out with, because like just to see how the people like actually lived it, like were even like, yeah, it's kind of the same way how that's kind of how it was, but then it kind of wasn't. But just to hear them say, yeah, that kind of like it was pretty close to what it was like, is kind of like, whoa.
Good. Again, I think y'all are tying some ideas together to help me. Aiden, how about you?
Yeah.
Why was it so shocking?
Just that reality check that actually happened, and that's something that we don't even think of like the things that were happening with these tigers and how people, like he said, how this was like a big publicized thing in Oklahoma and we didn't even know about it, you know?
Yeah. And I think this is kind of getting to the heart of it. And hopefully you guys are seeing this too. Maddie, I just saw you came in. Thanks for joining us. The thing for me, I think you're all hitting the nail on the head. This wasn't a TV show.
No.
You're watching this thinking, oh, this is scripted. This is somehow whatever. And then at some point you realize this is real life. This really happened. It's like last week we were talking about different entertainment and we were talking about like crime shows and criminal shows that we really get into.
Oh, yeah.
And then kind of the scariest ones are the ones where it's actually about real people, or you're hearing from real killers and getting in their heads and things like that. And here it is it's kind of like this kind of crazy exists. Like this kind of crazy is real. Zach, thanks for joining us. So I want you to kind of think about that then too. Like for me, I feel like this is where it goes back to where in high school I probably would have been fine with this, because part of my shock or my non-shock was I feel like I grew up with these people. Like, I mean, I'm from the middle of Georgia.
You lived on a zoo?
No. That part was
We bought a zoo.
well, that's the other thing. Well, and that was a shocking piece. So like to realize like how many zoos, private zoos is how they phrased it.
Oh,
But like you're talking about people's houses have tigers. Like how prevalent that kind of a thing
the
was
pet trade.
was definitely a shock. Yeah, the big cat trade was kind of the
Oh my
shock for me
gosh.
and how much that happened too. But like again, I grew up in the middle of Georgia, and granted, I grew up in an Air Force town, so it was pretty normal in that sense. But you go a little bit outside of that, and welcome to Tiger King. You know, so you're talking about, I mean, I think the word we would use for Joe, I mean, how would you so the main character of this show, Joe Exotic, kind of can't help but talk about the Tiger King. What word would you use to describe him? How would you describe Joe Exotic to someone who hasn't seen Tiger King?
A bipolar fruitcake. That would be my definition of him.
All right. So that's Aiden's. We talked about how we have to kind of dance around tonight because this is, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
How do you talk about Tiger King and stay appropriate? Good questions. All right. So we got Aiden. Preston, how would you describe him?
Probably hungry for fame. Like basically the entire show. I mean, he was doing all these things, doing parades. I mean, the whole him running for governor, like that was all just so he can be more famous.
He had his own TV show.
He had his own TV show. He had his own
Studio.
studio making you know
The
good country music. You know, I Saw a Tiger. You know,
So before we jump to Clayton, I'm loving the chat right now. And Ben, thanks for joining us. Kaylee, thanks for joining us. So we see different words coming through as I ask this question. And Zach offers eccentric, and I agree. And then you have Austin who goes crazy. So he's the same one that said, how do you describe the show? But this is even a bigger kind of crazy. So, okay, Clayton, what do you think? How would you describe Joe Exotic?
Addict. I think he's definitely an addict. I think the show doesn't talk about some of the stuff that went on, but I feel like he definitely does some sort of drugs. You can definitely tell throughout the show.
Interesting.
He's
okay.
a tweaker.
And so, oh, man, that's interesting because I don't know that I would go that far necessarily, just because of that post show where they kind of talk about actually some of them were doing drugs, and certainly Joe did drugs at some point in his life. I think he even references that.
The way he talked about like whenever he was like within that relationship with like Travis and them, like he talked about how he would buy him drugs. That's kind of like how he kept him along, is he bought him stuff. So if he's buying him like his partner drugs, he's definitely gonna be buying drugs for himself too.
Not necessarily though, too. So
Yeah.
I just think that he probably has had a history and he knows that world really well.
Yeah.
But at that point of the show, I'm not 100% sure or not. But I would offer like crazy is a word I would use, and I think there is just something mental going on for him. I think the one of my friends, I told you guys this, offered the nicest way to be able to put it, or the technical words for it. He's a homosexual polygamist, you know, so it's kind of okay, I got to wrap my mind around that, because just even understanding someone who's a polygamist is hard enough, right? And so then you have that piece. And then actually the word that sticks out to me is from the post episodes. If you haven't seen the post episode, I really encourage it. It is very weird. They're in quarantine. They're just FaceTiming or something with the host and getting some answers. But the word that stuck out to me about Joe Exotic was actually evil, was the word they used. And so to hear, and it was interesting because I can't remember her name or his name, the guy who lost his arm, and he would describe for us like the Thanksgiving meal. Actually, Joe was a very charitable guy, and that meal actually happened every year, and it was for families that couldn't happen, and he would cook it, and family would cook it, things like that. So that kind of blew my mind. But then by the end of it too, though, she uses the word evil, which I was like, whoa, okay. So here's someone who thinks very highly, is bringing up someone's charity, but then says, I hope he never gets out of jail because he's absolutely evil. And so we're already kind of hitting some pieces. When we do Let's Talk About It, obviously we're wanting to talk, because that's kind of the idea. We don't sit around and talk well enough. And I mean, these days, maybe we are. But we also kind of have this piece where faith is kind of informing how we see things and understand things. And when I think about Tiger King and how does my faith inform how I understand what's going on, I think that word sticks out to me. So there's some part of evil, but then there's also, and again, I'm kind of like, I'm excited about it, but this reality piece is also a huge piece of it. What does that land with you guys?
The whole evil part, I definitely see how they definitely describe it though as like more towards the animals. You can definitely see how they talk about that whenever the euthanizing, like the killing, when he has to put down the tigers and such. You definitely see that.
And Christina said in the chat that she doesn't see him as evil. And Christina, I didn't either until I watched the show and heard the people who worked with him for all these years, who both brought up his charity and then brought up that point. And I was like, oh, wow. So there's something we just don't understand from what we see in the show that kind of threw me. Because I mean, again, I don't know how many people I've ever met in my life or heard about in my life that I would use that word for. So it's fascinating for me that was there. Sorry, Preston, you were saying something?
I mean, I don't think he was necessarily evil. I feel like towards the end though, he was getting desperate. Like, you know, who's the guy that partnered with him and everything to like buy him out from the zoo? I forget his name.
Oh, I'm seeing a J. Why am I seeing a J?
I know.
It's not Josh. It's Jeremy.
No.
John or something. Well, either way, and he was like, I mean, he was desperate for cash, and then he was like, "Oh, you're gonna give me cash? Like, you can do whatever you want." And then basically bought Joe out of the park, kicked Joe out, and then Joe being desperate for money, he's like, "All right, well, I'm gonna go sell as many cats as possible and whatnot, little cat cubs and whatnot. Just do whatever, just make as much money as I can." And that's just me. I mean, that man was at the end of his ropes towards the end of that show, and he was just desperate as all can get out.
So we've got some interesting points coming in the chat, and this is great. I love this. I love the comments. I love the conversation that's going to come from this. And Peyton, thanks for joining us. And so Ben asked us, what does it mean for someone to be evil? And I think that's a great question. And then he says, aren't we all at some points? Who are we to judge? Again, another great point to talk about. And then Christina brought up, I see him as completely narcissist, which is also a great point to bring up. And then if you equate narcissism with evil, then absolutely. Okay, so lots to unpack there. I really enjoy that. So starting with that first one, like what or how, and that's good. I went to what? What do you consider evil versus a who? What do you think? Is it a who or a what? And is that fair?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of it has to do with acts of a person, not necessarily the person themselves, but the way that they, not carry themselves, but what they do.
Yeah. No, and this is good because one of the few questions we got that came through the story before this happened was, who's the worst person on the show? And that question did not land on me very well. I was like, is that a question that we should be asking from a point of faith? I don't know if we can.
Yeah.
And instead, I think what's a fair thing is, and I think this is a good, again, when I bring up that word evil, it's because that word was used to describe him in the show. So that threw me when that was used to describe him. So I don't know if that's landing with me or not, but it stuck out to me. So then, but for me, I think there are things to talk about in what in this show is evil or what in this show is bad. Because that's the thing is when you say who's the worst person on the show, it's very dramatic, and I'm not a big drama guy.
Yeah.
But like, so let's talk about things in this show that are evil or things that you see or actions. Because I do think it's more of a what than a who. So I'm with Aiden on that boat.
What do y'all think?
I mean, I also agree. Evil is also a what. I mean, you can't really see someone who's evil unless you see them with their actions. You know, you have like these people that like might be evil just like mentally, but like you will never be. They seem like a good guy on the outside, but I mean, you can only tell that they're evil. Like, you know, when you see them doing like certain actions and whatnot.
Yeah, and I absolutely do believe in evil. There's no doubt about it. I think this world. I don't know how you live in this world, get to a certain point and don't believe in it. So like, I will acknowledge that sometimes there's demonic action in this world too, and so that is evil. And so who knows? And bringing in narcissism is an interesting thing. Because if you've ever been around a narcissist or seen true narcissism, there seems to be an evil component to that. And so it's kind of okay, is that a person? Is that something that develops? Is there spiritual things going on? Great questions. Awesome questions all to be asking. So kind of turning it back, when you think of this show, what stands out to you from this show that seems or comes across as evil or kind of just wrong or bad?
Feeding your husband to tigers.
Okay, speculation.
Hey, there's no confirmed evidence. He went to Costa Rica, okay?
There you go. Oh, it's interesting. Okay. So, Christine, I've just seen things come through. The worst person in the show is all the people filming him who do these bad things and don't do anything to stop. Interesting. So that's really interesting of how can you kind of watch this go by. And I think even the filmmakers ask that question, how do we let this go by? How do we not? And then Christina brings up, how about feeding your evil spouse to tigers or your spouse? That's evil. And everybody's agreeing. So here's the interesting part. So we didn't want to call Joe Exotic evil, but we're cool calling Carol Baskin evil.
Okay.
Evil.
I don't, and this is my opinion. I know feeding a person to the tiger allegedly is bad, but in my opinion, the worst thing was that she took 90% of her husband's children's inheritance and only gave him like 10%.
Sure.
To me, that was like that was pretty bad. Like, I mean, he was like what a millionaire and whatnot, and he was scared for his life. Like, he had like whole police reports and everything about like my wife's like pointing a gun at me and whatnot, and bless you. And like there was
Sorry.
there's an obvious sign that was like, yeah, he's in trouble, and like, you know, the police didn't find anything. I mean, there was even a lawyer. Was it the second episode they were talking about the whole murder case and everything? The lawyer was all like, yeah, we know who it is, and then the guy's like, oh, what can you say? He's like, I'm not obliged to say by the court of law because, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so we got, again, some fascinating stuff coming through, and I want to continue this conversation. So Austin brings up a comment we saw last week, too. Carol Baskin killed her husband, changed my mind. Christina says he thought of himself, and, well, I'll stop with Austin. So here's the thing for me. Here's a question I have for you. What for you is the most compelling thing that you hear in this documentary that tells you that she did it? And I think that's an important question. So for you guys, what do you think? What's the most compelling thing that you hear in this documentary that makes you think that she did it?
I don't think it was anything that I heard. It was just the way that she referred to her husband and the way that she referred to the topic. And I could tell that she didn't care that it happened.
Interesting.
And
okay.
that there was a lot of animosity between them.
So again, and so here, I almost want to pretend like this is a court of law. You know what I mean? And so for me, that doesn't stand up in court, right? I felt like she didn't care. You know, like I've met people who can't communicate or things like that. So all right, Preston, how about you?
I mean, well, like I said, like if. All right, so can you repeat the question?
So what's
again?
the most compelling thing for you that tells you that she did it?
I mean,
if you were in a court of law, what would stick out to you? If you were sitting in the jury, I'll put it that way. You were sitting in the jury seat. What would make you think that?
I mean, I would also agree with how
Just she doesn't seem to care and things like that.
I mean, wasn't there one part to where like her and someone else, like they broke into like his office and whatnot, like and like stole some
Sure,
documents? That
okay,
was very
yeah.
suspicious. I was like,
Huge.
okay, if
Huge piece.
If he didn't, if he flew to Costa Rica, why would she need to break into somewhere and steal some documents that have still not have been
and
released?
change a will, and his secretary
Yeah,
is like, I
change
wrote
the
that.
will.
I know what it said, and it's changed now, and everything's in.
The wording of it was like, it's like of disappearance instead of death. It's of disappearance. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah, or disappearance, which was, again, that's a really compelling piece.
And with my mom, used to being a lawyer, she was like, that doesn't fly. Like, there's never been like a will that states that ever. And I mean, the lawyer, even on the TV, even said like that's never
super
been
good. So I'm just saying, I was just throwing this out there, and I don't know if you have something else that you were thinking, but like a lot of people are basing it on Joe Exotic, and I was like, bruh, you cannot. Like, he would have been the worst witness ever to bring in a court case against Carol Baskin. But the greatest witnesses on the show were his family. So when they were talking, that's when I was like, huh. Like, they don't have anything to do with Joe Exotic, and this happened. But that whole changing of the will and all of that stuff. Okay, good. So Christina said he thought of himself first in every instance. He scares me more than Carol. And I agree with that 100% too. I think I would. And that's the thing is, people talked about freeing Joe Exotic. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you want Carol Baskin locked up, but you want to free Joe Exotic? That's terrifying.
They're like raising money and everything for it. It's
Right.
crazy.
And I'm like, I think you now scare me more than either of them because you feel this way. Yeah. Okay. So Corey agreed with something you had said, Preston. And then I see Ben's bringing out some things. My point is more of a let's compare his evil deeds with the sins we commit every day. Are we different just because we were forgiven, or do we need to think of this evil question differently? What do you think of that? I have my thing, but I feel like I'm cheating.
As much as his actions, like, here's what I mean.
He already knows the answer.
No, I know my answer.
Yeah, he just wants to hear our answers and judge
I mean,
them.
everyone is forgiven. Like, no matter what, you can be the worst person ever. You can be Joe Exotic. You're forgiven no matter what. And it's really hard to us to wrap around us, the guy that we've seen that doing these evil actions, that he can be forgiven. It's really hard to wrap around this whole grace thing, but it just shows just the love of God and what he did on that cross.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a huge point to bring across is grace. And so this always comes to that question: is all sin equal? What's the answer?
Yes.
Earthly standards, no. Heavenly standards, yes.
Aiden got it. So there's actually fancy theological language for this. It's Latin. So there's coram mundo, and then there's coram deo. So coram mundo, before the world, is all sin equal. Is Joe Exotic killing tigers the same as me lying?
No.
Yes.
No.
No, not in this world.
No.
Not in this world. Totally different. You know what I mean? Completely different. Now, before God, are they the same thing? Well, yeah,
Yes.
no doubt about it. And that was so that kind of leads into an interesting part of the show for me, Joe Exotic's faith. So did y'all catch this when you were watching this?
Yeah.
A little bit, but I mean, there was so much craziness going on. Like,
Yeah, but there were parts of this early on. Joe's kind of making fun of it, doing things like that. But certainly toward the end of it, I mean, he's saying prayers and they're in Jesus' name and things like that. And they're very faithful prayers. And so it's a really interesting piece to see this kind of struggle going on there too. So that was a fascinating point. So she admitted to holding a gun on him the first time they met. I'm not saying Carol is evil, but she did something evil. Are there more evil things or people than others? Are there more evil things or people than others? I'm not necessarily following that one. Can a good person commit an evil act and still be good? We're going to stop on that question. What do you think with that? How would you? So I'm going to say it again, and then I want you to see. Oh, dang it! They already did it in the chat, so I'm going to see what you have to say. Can a good person commit an evil act and still be good?
of course.
Well, it depends.
On what? Don't cheat, Aiden. Aiden's trying to cheat.
I guess it would depend.
Put your phone away, Aiden.
Yeah, put your phone away, Aiden. Jeez.
I'm using Slater. At Clayton.
Your cheating websites don't work here.
All right. So what do you think, Clayton?
Let's see here.
Can a good person commit an evil act and still be called good?
By what standards? Is the whole thing? It's gonna be it's gonna be up to the standards.
Oh.
What's considered an evil act?
Like earthly standards or heavenly standards? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. What's considered an evil act?
So let's pick one. Can a good person kill a tiger, quarantine a teenage boy and marry him, and cause his death, or lead to his craziness? And can you be Joe Exotic and still be a good person?
Yes.
Okay, so this is interesting. So immediately followed up, Crystal said, "Are any of us good?" And then Ben said, "My point exactly." And that's where I'm at. Yeah, like the Bible says, there's no one who's good, no, not one. So this concept of what it means to be good is a really big thing that comes out in this show. And I think it comes out in reality television all the time, is that somehow we're judging it and things like that. I do think Ben, it can, and I haven't followed all this chat, so I can't see exactly where we're at. But I do think there's a line to be crossed though, too, when you take that too far. Because there's this level of saying, who freaking cares about what happens, because, we're all bad and who cares?
Oh, yeah.
They're evil. But, and so I've said this as a pastor, I would struggle with counseling or going for someone in jail who did certain things. There's certain things I wouldn't mind at all, because, I'd go there, but there are very few things that if you told me, hey, you got to go minister to this person, I'd be like, oh God, this is going to be the biggest challenge of my life. I need you to help me.
It'll
right?
be dicey.
Yeah. So let's see where the chat kind of went. We're kind of back there. I'm sorry, guys. Then Christine said it's the perfect crime and she knows it. Her still on Carol Baskin. And then she admitted to holding a gun in the first time. This, amen, P-Dog. Good. Okay, so there's lots of things. Made me nauseous. Whatever benefited him. Narcissistic personality by your standards. Can you be Ben Singer and be a good person? No. But again, can we be anybody and be a good person? No. When it benefits you and no one else at all. So this is kind of taking it. Where are you guys landing with all this stuff? What's the most intriguing part of our conversation so far that you want to take a little bit further?
Well, I feel like the biggest point so far is what is considered evil.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've kind of already hit that on the head.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, so here, and I guess that's the thing. So Ben saying that's my point, that none of us are good. But again, I think there's a point where you have to call out evil. Like, okay, yes, there are pieces of my life. There's certainly bad, evil, whatever you want to call it, but you can't be satisfied with that. Like, you can't be. That's something that needs to haunt you a little bit. That's something that needs to be addressed in your life. That's something that you need to take care of. And so we need people to be pointing out evil in this world. And I go back to Joel was the youth person before I was here. And I remember a conversation he was having with some students when he was here. And he said to a group of boys, he said, at what point is what breaks God's heart going to break yours? And it's a really good question that I think is a God-honoring question to ask. So I think there's a level of calling out what is evil, like a good thing. Again, not saying you're evil, but this what's happening here is evil. And then you get in that challenge of, are they in the church or not in the church? Because how can you hold someone outside of the church to the standard of those in the church and things like that? But to someone who calls himself a follower of Jesus, there's a level you got to talk about evil. You've got to stand up and talk about certain things. And so that's really, I don't know, a lot of stuff. Questions coming through. So our good works are only good in service to our neighbor. Yeah, we talked about that Tuesday night about vocation, and only good because of the freedom in Christ. Austin is still on Carol Baskin's evilness, but it's a good question. Is Carol Baskin Zoo more evil because she makes a big profit off of tigers and volunteers, or less evil for keeping tigers when they're old?
I think the majority of the people in this show are evil.
Oh yeah.
With a lot of the things that they're doing, there's a lot of lies, a lot of deception.
Even with Doc Antle, which I mean, we only talk.
He's
about,
fascinating. Talk about Doc Antle.
I mean, okay, so Doc Antle, obviously. Wait, what was his study? It was like mythological science,
something like that.
Mythological science.
His religion or whatever. Yeah,
mythological science. I mean, he has like a whole.
Oh, his doctorate.
Doc Antle, and he has like a whole harem of like wives and whatnot. Polygamy. polygamous and whatnot, and I mean, the first couple episodes we talked to him, and he seemed like the tame one out of all of them, and then we start to
So did he? That's my question for you.
What?
When you first met him, was anybody triggered by anything with Doc Antle?
not really.
Just like the fact that he had so many like spouses, and then like kind of
Okay, so the polygamous part.
That was the
very-
only thing.
it was almost
But he was
slave
very
labor though.
he was very standoffish towards people.
Yes.
Whenever they would call him out on stuff, like if it was anything due to him like not taking care of his animals and stuff like that, he would like get really, really upset. Mm-hmm. But it would be like very passive aggressive.
So, and I think Christina, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but it was the level of narcissism you saw right off the back. So like he was going to film and they left in pieces that were edited, like they were supposed to be edited out. And he was like very controlling. Like he'd start going, he'd be like, no, stop that, grind it back. We're going to go this way. We're going to go over here. And I was like, oh man, I was terrified. He's another one I'm scared of. I would not want to be around him. You know what I mean? So he's right up there. It's kind of interesting. So I have some people, commenting in here. So we're called to speak the truth in love. The question should drive us to repentance. Everybody's broken and we can see when something is wrong, right? Or when we can see something. Some people feel bad. Those that enjoy doing wrong, that seems like evil to me. Good point. I think that's an interesting point. When you truly enjoy it, when you revel in it, live in it, you got to start asking some questions. Truth and love. My concern is conversations like this where we say, oh, he's evil. That's not truth and love. Should we discuss matters like this as Christians differently, going back to why that phrase of evil threw PL in the first place? So, and again, I think what we've done, Ben, though, is talk about evil things and evil itself. But I do think, again, and I don't know how to hit the nail on the head, but I do think there is such thing as an evil. I won't go as far as saying evil person. I'll say the word evil presence that you just can't wrap your mind around. You know what I mean? So, and when you've encountered someone, and I've told it, like my student, a couple of years ago at Outdoor Ed, someone asked me, Pastor Lee, have you ever seen a demon? I was like, I believe I've only met one once in my life. You know, and I have my demon story, and I've heard of other situations from other people and other pastors who have done this too. And that's where I'm getting at, though. I think there's this evil presence that is makes itself manifest itself in people. So again, it's something you might call as what's the word? What's the biblical word? Possession. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it might be something like possession going on here too. And again, I think you got to talk about evil. I think you have to call it out where it is, and things like that. So I think it's kind of interesting there. Christina said, "Love you guys. Great job." Do you think Joe's life would have been better if his brother didn't die? And do you think his death sent his life down a sad spiral? I can't really put my head on it. I think there is so much more that we don't know about Joe Exotic that probably took him on the path that he was at. There was probably a lot of evil in his past. And certainly death is an evil. Death is not a gift. Death is a bad thing. And so that can certainly affect in different ways. But I'm sitting here, you can't become Joe Exotic without more stuff behind that.
I mean, it wasn't just that death; it was his husband's death too that also got to him as well.
Huge. So spoiler alert for anybody that hadn't seen that, but that was definitely the most heartbreaking moment of the whole show. There's this accidental gun death by someone who had a huge whole life in front of them, and again, the fact that it was caught off camera in a sense, but the moment was caught. So that was definitely in that moment. I mean, evil, right? That's evil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a good kind of word to be able to dive into that too. So I know we kind of need to wrap up right now. You guys have been great. And that's what I told Kyle. I was like, this is going to be really hard to talk about Tiger King for just one episode, but that's what we're doing. And so one of the other questions I gave them beforehand was, if you had to say, what's the main takeaway you should have from Tiger King, or what's the main point, or why did they do this documentary? What is the purpose of Tiger King? What is it? So give us your answers in the chat, and let's give us our answers here. What's the main point? What's the lesson? What's the purpose of the documentary?
Don't do crack or heroin.
Okay, so Clayton's going on the drug route. Clayton is not dealing with real life for what it is. He said, don't do crack or heroin.
I like my teeth.
There you go. Meth. That was meth. Meth was the teeth. Crack and heroin, I don't think, do the teeth. I don't know enough.
Oh, so he's an expert over here now.
I just said I don't know enough.
Mine would be this is what happens when fame. This is the bad side of wanting fame. Doing whatever it takes to get fame. I mean, Joe's daughter first started wanting to run for president. And they're like, oh, he didn't want to do that. Well, the fact that his running mate or the guy that was helping him was the guy that he met at a academy that was selling guns to him. And he's like, hey, you know politics? He's like, oh, hey, why don't you be on my, but help me my
Because he was a
president?
political science major. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he didn't know anything. And like, it just shows the extreme that he would go for fame. And he saw that Carol Baskin was like, trying to bring down his fame by doing a smear campaign. So he's like, all right, I'm going to have you try to kill him. Kill her. And like, he was just doing everything for fame. I mean, the TV show, the movie. I mean, he did all those interviews and whatnot. I mean, even now in prison, he's still famous now.
And he's loving it. Yeah.
And apparently he's got coronavirus now, so he's
does he really?
He's even more famous now.
I did not know that.
Yep.
I did not know he had coronavirus.
Yep.
Dang, I didn't know that either.
Wow.
Yep.
All right, Aiden, what's your thing? What do you think's the purpose of the documentary?
I think it's supposed to show us to own up to our actions, because I felt like a lot of people in that show, regardless of who they were, didn't own up to their actions. And I feel like that's showing us what the magnitude of not owning up to our actions can do.
Okay, awesome. So we have don't do drugs. These are all great messages. Be aware that chasing fame is not the end goal of life, and how destructive it can be. To glorify yourself more than anything else can be highly destructive. And then how do I paraphrase what you had?
Stuck.
You want to say it again?
Stumped.
How do I paraphrase this?
Own up to your actions.
Yeah. So all the lying, all the cheating, all that stuff. So the integrity, that was the word I was going for. So integrity. There's a level of being integral. So mine's going to be the lame answer, guys. What do I think this documentary is all about?
Jesus.
And it's because I'm going, it's not that. And I think Jesus is not a lame answer, by
It's
the way.
not a lame answer.
No.
You just high five.
It's a school book answer.
Evil. All right. So this documentary, why did they hold out? Why did they not go to the police right away? Things like that. Like when you watch it and you really see it, the whole purpose of the documentary is about big cats. You know what I mean? So that's the thing, is why would Carol Baskin even agree to do this if this is just going to sling her through the mud? Because ultimately it's giving awareness to the reality there are more big cats in captivity in North America.
That's what they said right there at the
than
very
there
end.
are out in the world. And that was the thing.
It was at the beginning and the end, too.
That was the whole point of the whole thing, was saying, guys, this isn't okay. Like, people owning these cats, because, and it was interesting. I didn't really get this until afterward, but it was the guy who had lost his arm said, like, why? And all the workers, you ask them all, why did you stay? And it was like, oh, the animals, the cats. Like, that's why we were here. It wasn't Joe. It wasn't all the other stuff. And they were living miserable lives working for this zoo. Why? Because the cats, because they couldn't go back out into the wild. Like they could not return after being domesticated. And that was the whole message of the whole show. So I know it's kind of y'all did a great job of diving into other pieces of it. Definitely some more philosophical pieces over here, practical realities of not doing drugs over here. But the reality of the show was, hey, this is a really big issue. And so Carol Baskin is even still pushing, like, please pass this act through Congress, because this is real. And like, I worked at a summer camp in Maine for 2 summers, and just up the road was a zoo, and I didn't think anything of it. It was just a guy's house that had tigers, had something else, things like that. Yeah, and it was a big deal. And that was the first time I'd really heard about private zoos. But like, this is a problem. Like, and again, I found myself watching this show, especially early on, going like, oh, how fun would that be to own a tiger? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like you have that feeling, and then you have to
win.
realize, actually, this is really bad.
$2,500.
And think about it. Like, that's the thing, is $2,500. I keep knocking your mic. I'm sorry about
It's
that.
okay.
All that Walmart ham.
But like the people would go to these parks and have the same feeling. Like, oh, a tiger cub, mom, can I have one? Like, no, like, you know, because this belongs in the wild. There's a level of honoring God's creation. So there's the Jesus card with it, of honoring God's creation and allowing it and being a good steward of it, and actually not allowing this kind of stuff. And this shouldn't be okay. And it was interesting. Apparently, there's a biopic, which I believe means a movie about Joe Exotic. And Carol Baskin is asking the SNL star that's apparently running it, please don't actually use tigers, because that's kind of the point of everything we were trying to do. Like, please CGI and please use previously used footage. Please do not actually have tigers in your movie, because that's the whole point. They're not for show. They're not for pets. They're for living out their lives. So again, I know I had the boring answer, the lame one. So
You know something really interesting
what's that?
is that Carol Baskin said that she will not be back on this show, like if they have another season or whatever, because of the way that the show portrayed her. She said that she will not allow them to record anything else of her, and that if they try to come around the place, then they're like gonna get thrown out or whatever.
Interesting.
Sus.
Well, I'm sitting here going like,
Whacked.
I would be super thankful if I was.
Sus.
In a sense, I get it. I mean, because that is true slander if it's not true, and like how they portrayed her, and they definitely they clipped it great. I mean, they did a great job. I mean, it's highly convincing, but at the same time, her cause is out there in such a big way right now too. So some of the answers as we wrap up from the chat, because I missed those going through. I think Tiger King clearly shows human brokenness. Yes, Noah, 100%, and I think that's what Ben was getting at too. Human brokenness is a real thing, and Jesus has a real answer to brokenness. And turn to him if you need it. We'll talk more about Jesus. I love him. Our need for Jesus was brought up. Yes, I agree with Ben, Joe and Carol, and so many of them worship the God of self. And I agree with that. Definitely what you brought out there a little bit too. It's sad it was original and don't go drug show for schools, then meth addiction. Documentary, ironically, the documentary is about how cool tigers are. After we had that conversation. And yeah, we're taking it home. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this time. I know I enjoyed it. I think it's a fascinating topic. I appreciate that we were able to keep it as PG as we possibly could in talking about this stuff too. Guys, if you have more questions for us, if you have more topics for us, message us on Instagram, message us however you can get in hold of us. That's a great way to do it. We'll be back next week. We're talking music actually next week. We're talking about country music and rap music and that kind of feud. It's going to be interesting there, having that conversation. Definitely just check us out on Instagram. You can find out all the crazy stuff we're doing. But until later, you cool cats and kittens, this has been Let's Talk About It.